Good afternoon, my name is Sarah James from Craft Festival, and today I'm a little bit later than billed. I am talking with jeweller Hendrike Barz-Meltzer, who is based in London. She's a jeweller specialising in silver with Kambu, I think is the technique, but she can put me right on that in a minute. So we're going to patch through to her in a minute. I think she's going to be joining us at any moment from her studio. So just to say that the Craft Festival in Cheltenham, because Hendrike is going to be joining us then, is on the weekend after, starts a week tomorrow, on the 10th of March, and we'll be joined by 100 makers from all over the country, from the top of Scotland to Cornwall, Brighton, London, Wales, from every part of the country is represented. So that's apart from Ireland, unfortunately, but and Northern Ireland. But we do sometimes get makers from those wonderful places as well. But at the moment, so I'm just going to see if Hendrike, there she is. I'm going to invite her. She will join us then from her studio, or she can send us a request to join. Either way, there she is. I think she'll turn on the camera.
Oh, yeah. Bear with me.
Yeah.
Here.
Two little arrows going.
There we go. No.
Tap it.
There we go.
Tap it again. There she is.
It's working. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly well.
Okay.
You really well. Great. Apologies for the lateness.
That's all right.
So sorry.
It's okay.
But how are you?
I'm fine. Now it's all working. I'm much more relieved. So yeah.
What is, as I say, it's me, not you, definitely. But it's what am I saying your name right? How do I say your name correctly?
Well, the German pronunciation would be Hendrike, but Hendrike is fine.
Hendrike. Well, I kind of put it. I wasn't sure. Hendrike. Right. Okay. Well, let me tell you. So, are you first? What's the word? Are you German born? Were you born in Germany?
Yeah. Born in East Germany.
Yeah.
But came to England in 1992.
Yeah.
So now British, and the rest is history, really.
Exactly.
My adult life here, really. Yeah. So
yes. Yeah. So did you come over to train, or was obviously you a young person then? How old were you when you came over in 92?
18.
18. Was that too big to train as a jeweller?
No. As I said, I grew up in East Germany, so the overriding idea was to travel, see the world. So I worked as an au pair for a year roughly, and then started to study. Yeah, I didn't have any idea what to do. So a friend had done an art foundation course, and that seemed a brilliant idea to, well, not just bridge some time, but find out what I wanted to do. And the metalwork department in there, took, that was it. And I then applied for a degree in St. Martin's. And
oh, fantastic! So you have quite a creative upbringing when you were living in Germany.
Pardon? Sorry, I didn't get you.
Did you have a creative upbringing when you were a young person?
Yes, I mean, in the sense that it was very much, you had to make to get by. My grandmothers sewed and crocheted and knitted. My parents had a workshop repairing things for dentists. So making was very much was just all around me. And I loved making from an early age.
And have like an earliest memory of when you made something? Is there something that springs to mind?
Yes, I was sewing a lot. So my grandmother, my mother also sewed a lot. So I think when I was maybe 10, I sewed my first dress, and I thought I was going to go down that route. But then metalwork, was something I, preferred really in the end.
So what was it that drew you to the metalwork?
It's interesting. I mean, I went into the art foundation thinking I was going to do fashion. That was my idea. But I just loved working with metal, and spending more and more time in the little metal workshop down there, and in the end just liking it. And the strange thing is, my parents had thought about this years earlier. They had wanted me to become a jeweler, and I said, no, I don't want to do that.
And so jeweler, do you think?
Pardon?
Do you think they saw the jeweler in you?
Maybe they did. Yeah, maybe they did. I don't know. But yeah, parents, that's parents for you.
Like, damn, they're always right.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
My kid, I drive my kids mad with that because they're like, they go, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and I go, "Well, what about that?" And they go, "Oh no," and then it all goes wrong, and they go, "Ugh, you
Yeah,
were right all along." You could
I know.
do that now with your. You've got a daughter as well, haven't you? So,
Yeah, I've got two.
oh,
Yeah. So one's a teenager and the other's 10. My daughter's 10. So yeah, so
okay, good.
they like making, but they have their own ideas.
Good luck with that. Yeah, I'm the side of that period of life. But yeah, so you're coming to Cheltenham and you've done the show. You've been to Buffy, is that right? Have you done the?
Probably last year for the first time, yeah,
Yeah,
and this year again. So
no, that's great because your work's really stunning. And tell me about the technique that you seem to specialise in. I mean, you've probably got lots of different ranges and things. I know jewelers have quite a few things that they do. But is it Kaebu that you use? What is the?
yeah, I pronounce it kumbu. I'm not Korean, but that's how I how I pronounce it.
I'm never sure if I say it right. So I'll take you as a guide because you do.
Kumbu, yeah. So that'll do. So that is a Korean technique. I can show maybe just a piece so people understand what it is. I'm sort of holding it against some black background. So that's a brooch, made in silver, and where I have put on a pattern in gold leaf. So the gold leaf is something like this.
So
So it's a gold foil.
a very thin layer that you. Because I noticed you sent us a little film, which I think we used a bit of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you looked like you had sort of a fairly basic sort of hot plate.
Yeah, yeah. That's the nice thing. It's a very clean technique. So this is where I came to it. I wanted to avoid gold plating. Gold plating is quite not an eco-friendly process. It involves lots of chemicals, and I wanted to also be in control of it. I wanted to do it myself and didn't have to send it out to a plater. So I came across this technique a few years ago and tried it out. And the tools and the materials that you need for it are quite simple. And, like a hot plate, you have these burnishes. They're made from agate, the tips. So that's a hard stone. And
Oh,
you have to prepare the silver in a certain way. And then you cut your gold and you lay the piece on the hot plate. And then
so you heat up the receiving piece then? Is it the piece that's receiving the gold? You
absolutely, yeah. It needs to all be very clean. Cleanliness is really important.
Yeah.
And then you sort of burnish the gold. You apply pressure and you burnish the gold into the silver, and that creates a bond because the gold is pure. It's 24 karat gold foil. It's 13 microns. It's very thin, but not actually that thin.
Yeah.
So
Because I've seen it before, like I've seen the finished item before. I think in my mind, I thought that you kind of almost hammered it in, because it's so completely immersed in the metal. Is you can't, it's not. You don't. Is there a texture when after it's on? Is there?
I usually always texture my silver background first, regardless of whether I do that technique or not.
Yeah.
So the gold foil kind of takes on the texture. So in fact, it helps it. If it's just laid onto a plain surface, you would see a little sort of bump.
Yeah.
But with the texture, it sort of really sinks into the metal, and I love creating patterns with it. That's my thing that I'm really interested in. I can't really. You can do it in other techniques, but it's quite a free technique, almost a bit like painting.
Yeah. But
Yeah, within reason.
has just a really beautiful quality to it, isn't it? I mean, I can't
Yeah.
what I like about it, but it just looks sort of a bit effortlessly placed on top. But I know that's not the case at all. But when did you start working in that technique? When did you build up to do? Have you worked in different ways over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm somehow drawn to Eastern sort of techniques. I love Japanese techniques, the aesthetics. I did a lot of silk braiding a few years ago, which is called kumihimu. It's the Japanese way of making obis, the belts for the kimonos. And kumbu is another one. It's from Korea, but it's a very defined and yet a very simple procedure in some ways, and I like that. And it's, you know, the effect it has. It can be very beautiful, very elegant, and very subdued in some ways. But
Yeah.
you know,
There are factors
so
there to the. It's a very subtle technique, but it's really, you say, it's a very elegant finish to the pieces.
yeah,
I,
it's I
and
mean, there's gone.
I did read about a little bit about you before I came to speak to you, and I see that, you know, and you've mentioned it already about, you know, the environmentally friendly. You know, that's really important to your practice, because, well, like with all processes, especially, you know, we're not manufacturing as such, but, you know,
Mm,
making things, there is often a downside to any,
mm.
with whether it would be the process itself or any waste created. But is that something, you know, you've worked on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, being a one person business, you know, I can control it. That's the positives. But obviously, it takes a huge amount of time, you know, to do all that. So, but I'm trying to critically look at my practice, at the chemicals, at the materials, the processes, the packaging, etc. that I'm using, just to do my bit, you know, and the jewelry industry is a really dirty one, you know, and it's surprising how many areas are not touched on, and people have done many things to clean it up and provide better alternative, you know, for the chemicals that we use. But there's still a lot of grey areas, and there's so much still to be done. You
Yeah,
know,
but I think,
um,
well, correct me if I'm wrong. When you are an individual practitioner, you know, you catch as much of the waste as, you know, any sort of particles. I think because obviously there's a lot of value in those small little
oh
particles.
yeah,
So
yes, I mean that has always been done.
yeah,
You know, so the recycling of precious metals is not new to
no,
this day on age. You know, jewelers throughout the ages wanted to keep their gold. They knew the value of that, and caught it and recycled it. So, you know, but it you know, it goes about the questioning of where those materials come from. You know, what people are involved. You know, what are the conditions that those people live in, where those materials and stones are coming from. And but it's a tricky area,
yeah,
because whilst I would like to, for example, go with um, fair mind or fair trade gold, I can't actually afford the process at the moment, you know, to sign up to that um, scheme, because I don't use that much gold at the moment. You know, it may change. I would love to in the future. It's an aim. So
yeah.
you know,
Because there are you can buy reclaimed silver, can't you? As in the only the sheet of silver can be, you know, which is I don't know if that's a new thing or not, or whether you.
it, now thankfully, yes. I mean, most of the silver that I buy is recycled. However, and that's really the only route for silver. Whilst for gold, you have, you know, fair trade and fair mine gold. But for silver, there isn't really an alternative. Yes, there is some fair trade and fair mine silver, but when I looked into it, they told me it's unpredictable, the supply chain for, you know, fair mine silver. Um, so,
The whole,
but
I think the whole precious metal industry is kind of murky, isn't it? Really, when you go.
It, it is murky, and you know, I mean, it's a whole different subject, really. You know, if you talk about recycled gold, for example, I mean, you know, when I buy a new sheet of silver, gold today, and cut my piece out, and whatever is left over is then regarded as recycled, even though it was yesterday a new piece of gold. So, and that is the issue with recycled gold, that you know,
So it's
you know,
more about untouched then, isn't it? Rather than.
yeah, and that's the descriptions where, you know, where it gets very tricky and very difficult,
Yeah.
and you know, so
So
at the moment, gone.
let's just say, so we're moving away from the very tricky subject of metals, because I was watching, I recently watched that there was a series on the TV about the Brigsvat, you know, where the massive heist in the
All right.
talking about that there's a bit of the Brigsvat gold in all the jewelry that we wear, because it was just such a huge steel of it, and they had to smelt
All
it.
right.
Anyway, it's a whole it's a whole television program, right? It's fascinating stuff. But so you did your degree then in Central St Martin's, did you say?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great school, isn't it?
It is. It is. It was when I joined quite traditional, but it was sort of on the verge of becoming what it is now, really, a much more trend-setting school. I loved it. I loved the 3 years, best sort of years really ever. You had an idea and there were lots of tutors who helped you realize them. Fantastic, and you weren't stopped in your tracks. I had loads of ideas and it was amazing, amazing time.
Yeah, because I think that I was. What years were you there at?
So 93 to 97,
Yeah,
I think,
I think of
or
the
94.
I think of the 90s as the golden age of the art school to myself.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind of when I was at art school, it was the early. I finished in '93, but it was sort of that
Okay.
'90s, sort of when it was fully funded. There was tons of tutors. It was absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
but so you went? Did you go straight into practice then, straight after you finished, or?
No, actually, I completely changed track. I started work for a charity in South London, a charity working for families and children. And I just, after those 3 years, needed to focus on something completely different. I worked for an old tutor of mine for a few more years, but then also did one MA in modern history and one MA in human rights. Um, so it's sort of, I just felt I really needed to do these things, to see other things.
Try to work it all out.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to work out my sort of position in all of it, and towards the end of the time of where I worked for the charity, I then worked with refugees, and uh, you know doing craft courses with them, teaching them crafts, and that sort of coincided with me returning back to making, and having a family, working from home. And I just wanted to go back to making really and do my own thing rather than work for somebody else.
It gets in your blood, doesn't it? It gets in your bones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It just felt the right thing to do again, but I needed that break. I'm not regretting anything. It was good.
No, you can't regret it because you've done so much. This is all good. But we're going to see you next week now in Cheltenham.
Yep.
I think it's your first time there, is it?
First time, yeah. I haven't even visited, but all the pictures I saw look great. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, Cheltenham itself is a lovely, lovely town. We love it as a team. We actually enjoy the process, of staying there, and it's got lovely restaurants, lovely places to stay. I mean, we stay in good old Premier Inn, obviously. We're not staying there, but there's some gorgeous other hotels, but it's just a really nice, friendly place, and it's really not that big, really. So it's actually really easy to get about. And of course, the town hall then is sort of practically slap bang in the centre of the town. And it's just a beautiful sort of Regency building, so it's sort of late Georgian, maybe early Victorian, sort of variety. It was probably set up as originally. And now we know they host events there all the time. We're one of their longer events. They often do lots of music and comedy, nighttime stuff. So what are you going to be bringing with you, Hendrike?
Well, a variety of things. I made a few new pieces. I've put a few pieces sort of on black background so you can see them. So that's a necklace I'm bringing, which, well, the camera doesn't really show it up, but it's made from sort of silver loops with little 18-karat gold rings. Then some different pieces, and these are quite interesting. We haven't talked about that. This is not the Kumbu technique I talked before. You can't really see it here, but it's a sort of an overlay technique with 18-karat gold on top of silver. So that gives a bit more of a 3D effect, and I've done a lot more with that. These have sort of gold wires on the ears. There are many reasons for it, which, again, is another topic.
So if you could describe your style, how would you describe it?
Tricky. Understated, I think. Sort of simple, minimal, hopefully elegant. But yeah, it's I don't know, like that really.
You need to
Sort
work,
of.
you need to work on that because I think
Yeah, exactly.
beautiful, and it's just got really lovely simple elements to it, but it just there's still a lot of detail even though it's saying it's simple. It does have those, I think maybe with the techniques that you use you can add these sort of small elements, aren't they, but they create a structure within the pieces. And again, those little details, like saying it's a silver joined with gold, that's
Yeah.
just there's a lot of technique in there though, isn't there?
There is, and that's one aspect I really love. I love learning, and I love the combination of ideas, and then finding almost like a language or a technique to fulfill that. And along the way, if I can learn something new, this is
Yeah.
great.
Simple and minimalist can be really tricky, to get right. I'm a bit of a gilding of the lily type person, really. I tend to put kind of like I try to be all pared down. It's going to be it's like you should see my sitting room. It's like bright yellow with flowery wallpaper. It's absolutely crazy. But that simple understated elegance that is actually quite, it can be very tricky to pull off.
It's a tricky one. I mean, I've always been drawn to that. I mean, it's interesting at college actually. At St. Martin's, one tutor actually said, "Oh, your work is so German," and that really threw me. I mean, I had been in the country, I don't know, a few years, but I thought, how is my work German? So I thought, I mean, I actually wrote my essay in the third year about that, about identity, and
Yeah. So what
um,
do you think you meant by that?
I have no idea. Well, it's sort of, I mean, German jewelry can be quite, what's the word? Severe or quite, um, I don't know what it is, but it's not playful. But it's not playful and not
So more,
with curly whirly.
more geometric. I think because when
Yeah.
you, because Collect is on now this weekend, isn't it, in London?
Mm,
And usually they have a few jewelry good galleries from Europe.
mm,
Is it Gallery Ra? There's a few places that
mm,
the work is usually wildly more, uh, I would say, avant-garde really than the jewelry we have in this country. But those often are maybe jewelers from Germany, or Holland. So there's usually a really strong aesthetic, I think, but
mm.
not necessarily. It's interesting to say typically German, isn't it? But it's like, what does that mean exactly? I think
Yeah,
maybe he meant it as that you have a strong sense of design.
maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it puzzled me then. It still puzzles me,
Did
but
it
I think it's
did,
interesting how it evolves.
did it not feel like a compliment or what?
I'm sure it was meant as a compliment. I did take it as a compliment, but it just made me think endlessly how. And actually, I had a Greek friend at that time, and I remember her saying that she used a lot of vibrant blue in her work, in her jewelry, and she said that is just, the sea and the sky of where she came from. And I thought, that's amazing. And I'm sure subconsciously somewhere in my work, maybe that's, the area where I come from. Maybe, I don't know.
I started, I went to art school originally, went to Leicester Polytechnic. I think if my friend Russell is here as well, I think I noticed him coming on from Canada. We both went to Leicester. And interestingly, part of our module was on 21st century design, and we were all look at the Bauhaus, and German design. And then interesting now that you're looking at Korean design. I think we all look at other countries that we admire the aesthetic for, and
Yeah.
in the UK, we did in the curriculum was a strong sense of that sort of mid-century postmodernism, German architecture, particularly, and
Mm.
design that I know we were very much encouraged to study. So it's all So if someone was saying it's particularly German, I think that they meant that was really really good. Personally,
Well,
yeah.
but I think, but I think it is interesting. I think it changes, and I hope my work is progressing and developing and changing. And you know, I went to Collect earlier. I had been invited to the private view, and I spoke to a lady, Bridget Bailey, and we were talking about her work and where her ideas and inspiration comes from. And she said, it's all a creative compost. I wrote it down. And that's exactly what I feel like, that there are so many impressions that you collect throughout your life, the things you look at, and it all kind of sort of ferments in your head, and at the right time you pull out that memory, and that then becomes a piece, and I love that saying.
The multi-layering of your life, yeah, composting of your life.
Yeah, just the way it sort of, it needs time to develop, and you gather all these things that you see and that you hear, and in time you will use them for something that.
Well, it's quite interesting because when you go through the formal art school route like you did, and I did, you are, quite pushed quite hard at you to try and develop sort of this visual language of your own, isn't it? But it doesn't always come straight away, does it? Because, essentially we are always told, through that research progress to look at other work, is it? To look at either whether historical or contemporary makers or historical, you're sent around the museums, like you were sent around all the different places to look at things. So what you say about the compost that's being layered on top of you is different, but on the core layer is yourself, isn't it? In terms of where you've come from or where you've been. So it is quite interesting to see all those different things. Right? So, developing. How long have you, are you still developing your style, or do you feel like I know?
Yeah. No, definitely.
Oh boy.
Absolutely. I mean, last year I read a lot of Greek mythology, and I went to the British Museum, looked at the Greek collection there, and they fascinated me. The shards of the pottery I saw in the showcases, and the patterns that are sort of partially visible, and partially destroyed, and partially, you no longer really know what this piece of pottery was used for. And I found that fascinating. And that sort of was the basis of my last year's collection. How I called it interrupted patterns. How I find patterns increasingly fascinating. I keep coming back to idea of patterns and the repetitiveness of them, but also how they can be interrupted, and what happens. The mind imagines the rest of the pattern and it carries it on by itself. And so I was trying to do that in some of my pieces last year.
Those pieces, and that's interesting to explain where that idea, because it did start and then drift away, didn't it? The patterning. I think I saw them last year, maybe when you were doing a festival or something. I definitely saw some pieces of your work that did that. But so constantly sort of investigating new things then. That's important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this year I was watching with my daughter these National Geographic series on ancient Egypt, and likewise I'm fascinated. We both want to go desperately to Egypt and see all the and the hieroglyphs, and we saw the hieroglyphs exhibition at the British Museum, and there was one stela that showed, I don't know, the family of whoever, these hieroglyphs, but also these carved things, and it was unfinished. And in the bottom left corner, you could see the grid they had drawn, and they were about to carve the next things in, and they hadn't done that yet. And I just thought that was amazing, how this spoke through the centuries, the thousands of years. To us now, still, we can still imagine how that artist, that craftsperson, was about to finish that pattern, and he hadn't. And but you can still see the grid.
And what were you going to say? Tell us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I just find that fascinating, the history of craft, how people made things, what tools they used, how they produced amazing artifacts with just very simple tools, and it just fascinates me. And that's sort of, so I think that's the basis for the next collection, maybe in Bobby. We'll see.
Yeah, well, it kind of circles back to your idea about about how to simplify the process to kind of make it as sustainable as possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about why do we need to have so much intervention
equipment
also in terms of having that lo-fi is it wabi-sabi, what's the phrase, where you have it where it's very simple, you don't overly use technology, and it's just I think, is that where you're coming from, really?
Um, I love my tools. I, I love buying tools. I love having tools, but I just need to remind myself every now and then I don't need all the tools in the world. Um, but yeah, if I can make something, or if I can make the tools myself even,
Yeah,
fantastic. You know, if I can learn something new,
yeah.
yeah, definitely,
It's because we have, we represent makers from all kind of backgrounds in terms of, making sort of what they're making, how they're making it, and we've even got, in fact, the cover of the maker that we chose to sort of represent the show in Cheltenham is actually a 3D printer.
Mm,
So because I think I'm a believer that it's all welcome. It's all, I think, whether you use just a chisel and a hammer, or you use quite, there's still skill even if you're programming. You know,
mm.
there's skill involved. So I think it's important that all different kind of, it's a broad church, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I absolutely agree. And some of the designs that are able or being able to um, produce now in 3D printing and jewelry as well, extraordinary.
Yeah.
And there definitely is a skill. It's not something I do. I don't know Rhino, all the 3D software. It's something I'd like to learn at some point, perhaps. But um,
No,
I like making with my hands.
yeah,
You know,
it leans towards whichever kind of person you are. You see, that's the
yeah,
really, it's kind of, if you want to investigate that, you can. If you want to
yeah.
do that side, you can too. Interesting. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but there was All That Glitters. I don't know if you watched that television program about jewelry.
I don't like it. I have to admit, I couldn't actually watch it. I watched one episode, and I quite dislike profoundly sort of reality TV shows that where people are made to fail, where where I just find it desperately sad,
Because
what it makes.
I watched the Potty Throwdown and I really enjoyed it.
Mm,
And they don't. There's a good. I think they manage it well, and it's really. I don't. At the same time, there's massive. They don't give enough time, and
yeah,
it's all a bit about building in a bit of jeopardy, isn't it, and making it, drama. Well, actually, all they just needed is a bit more time, really.
yeah,
Whereas I did find the glitters one a little bit too jarring because it was they weren't able to give the opportunity to make it, especially in the early weeks. There just wasn't enough time to make anything remotely useful
yeah,
because it's just,
yeah.
and it was a little bit too harsh as well. I thought the judging
Mm.
too harsh as well. It wasn't supportive.
Yeah, I I mean, they in one of the shows that I did in Edinburgh a few years ago, the chap came round and asked all the makers would they like to appear on the show, and my instinctive reaction was never ever. That would be my worst nightmare ever to having to,
Yes, because we're asking the people on there are all practicing makers, isn't it? Well, at least with
yeah,
Throwdown, they are by definition amateur makers, so
mm,
they're really there to grow and build. Whereas you feel like
yeah,
it is like being thrown under the bus.
yeah, yeah. It's not something I would consider. It just not for me.
Oh, it's interesting. I just wanted, because obviously I see it from a different perspective, but from
Mm,
I can see it would have been really difficult to watch. But anyway, we don't want to dwell on that. I just wanted you to have your thoughts on about it. But I just would like to say good luck, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you again. It's a smaller show than the movie, so I should be able to be a bit more available. Though saying that, we have got a lot on over the weekend.
I know. Sounds a very interesting program that's planned.
Yeah.
It's always a shame that the makers can't join in. But
I know. I was
they could be.
yeah, there's lots going on, but I think it's interesting to try and create all those different elements and to encourage people
Mm,
to investigate a bit more and maybe to learn a bit more and
definitely.
to stay for the day, so there's
Mm,
on, and to create that festival feeling, we can do that in Bobby Tracy without too much trouble because it's a big field and there's loads of
mm,
and there's a glass of wine involved and there's all sorts of fun to carry out. But indoors we have to sort of work a little bit harder. But I'm really looking forward to it. And good luck. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the experience. It's a lovely place, Cheltenham. But I'll look forward. Well, I'll be seeing you on Thursday at some point for setup.
yep,
But the public can come to Craft Festival Cheltenham from Saturday. From That's not true. Friday.
Friday.
Friday Friday the 10th of March till Sunday the 12th of March, and it's open 10 till 5 on Friday and Saturday and 10 till 4 on Sunday. Anyway, it's lovely to chat to you, Hendrika, and
Nice to talk to you too, Sarah.
take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye bye.